Welcome, everyone. Today is Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024, and this is a meeting of the Senior Center Site Selection and Building Committee. Oh, hang on. There we go. All right. This meeting will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting or hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with a particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting 375-414-6055 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. So I call us to order at 6:05 p.m. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Or are there any... if there are no modifications?
Make a motion to approve it as written.
I'll
Okay.
second, yeah, whatever.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Right, the chair says aye. Wonderful.
Katie, I think you have, because you're remote.
Should
And
have to ask us. Well,
no,
Okay. Yeah, Katie, you should do a roll call because you're remote.
Oh, a roll call? Okay. All right, so I guess I'll just go through the people. Ellen,
Here,
Ken,
aye.
oh, aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Dennis,
aye,
Bonnie,
Aye.
Dan V.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you for a minute. And I wanted to say an official welcome to Linda Collins, our newest member of the committee. She's going to serve as an alternate for us and will be participating in the conversation and will be participating in voting as well whenever there is a member absent. And there are 2 absent this evening. So welcome, Linda. We're excited to have you on board. And let's see. All right. So the first thing on the agenda is approval of, we have 3, well, we actually have 2 sets of the minutes. August 28th and October 2nd. Did everyone get a chance to review those minutes?
I looked at it.
ready to,
Okay, great. Can I get a motion to any discussion about any suggested edits or?
Yeah, one
Otherwise-
of them was. I think it was the first one I looked at was the 28th, right?
Mhm.
There was a typo in there regarding the I think it said typography of the land instead of topography of the land, something like that. Typographical survey instead of a topographical survey.
Okay,
There was a couple of other,
it's pretty good.
I'd say mine, I'd say in general, it covered the summary of whatever. There was a couple of minor typos and things like that.
okay.
I don't have it in front of me, so. You still have it in front of you, Katie? You find it?
I don't right now, no.
I just check for a typo in a couple of places and then, you know,
Okay.
see,
Yeah, so we'll approve as amended and we can check for the typos.
you know.
I'm comfortable with that if the group is. So Robert, do I need to roll call for all of the votes?
Yes, because it's a hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the August 28th
That
minutes?
we approve the meeting minutes as amended for August 28th, 2024.
Second,
All right. All right, roll call. Ellen,
aye.
Ken,
Yes,
Linda, yeah, Linda, does Linda vote because she wasn't at that meeting? Or
Yeah,
'cause-
You don't have to be at the
Yes.
meeting to approve the minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry, was that a pass?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, Dennis,
Aye.
Bonnie,
Aye.
okay, Dan,
Aye.
all right, chair says aye as well. Thank you, that passes. All right, same thing for October 2nd.
I think that one might have had the topographical,
Well, we can-
because I said something about a topographical survey, so.
Oh, right. So I guess we'd make the same motion. Can we make the same motion then? You know,
Sorry.
check the title.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes for October 2nd, 2024 as amended.
Second,
All right, Ellen,
aye.
Dennis, I'm sorry, Ken.
Dennis.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I was going around.
Aye.
Okay.
Bonnie, aye.
Okay,
And Dan's here now.
Dan, aye.
all right, chair says aye. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. All right, so that brings us to the meat of our meeting this evening to discuss the proposed timeline and the funding scenario for getting to town meeting. In your packet, everyone should have, I think on the back page, this wonderful project plan put forth, the timeline put forth by Dan. Dan, did you want to take a minute to go through that with everyone? And then Robert, after that, I think you were going to add some additional items about the town meeting process and the options for the timeline of the funding.
Yeah, sure. All right. Yeah, so working since the last meeting, we started kind of thinking, hey, so we don't, we're starting to do the due diligence. What other tasks are there, as we move forward? What are we going to need to take account for? And, especially as we look at, potentially funding this, the senior center project. And so on here, I put some of the major tasks that are involved. Obviously, there's going to be more than just that's shown on here. But you can see, we're working right now on the A&R and survey of the lot, and that's David E. Ross, so that's shown on here. And that contract was signed before today. As you can see, today is shown on here in green. That would have been yesterday, the 22nd. The 21E, that has not been contracted just yet. We're pretty much almost done reviewing it. I got to talk to Bonnie offline. We got a response back from one of the consultants today on that. So we're almost ready to go, and that shouldn't take too long to complete. For environmental permitting, and this is a critical item for this project, which there's still more to be determined here. So right now, the committee has approved moving forward with a habitat assessment, and we did have proposals from two firms, and the firm we're working with is Goddard Consulting. And so I've been in touch with Steve Ribberty at Goddard, and he's going to be coming out to do the habitat assessment. And so basically what it'll involve will be him visiting the site and looking at the area, evaluating for the Blandings turtle, the New England blazing star, which is the plant, and if there's any other habitat we would have to worry about in the area. One thing to note is the habitat assessment he's going to do is not just for the 3-acre site that we've outlined, but also the corridor of the road where the water main and the electric would come down too, because that's also within the priority habitat of rare species.
Well, that's all the way from Park Street?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the map. I think it might be where the gate is. I think it's from the gate, the Bishop Pearson gate, but it does continue down most of the corridor. Yeah, so he is including
Big
that.
chunk of the town.
Yeah, and it didn't change his
Oh,
price.
DPW
too.
property district.
Yeah, right.
Do you know when he's gonna be able to get to that?
So I haven't, yeah, so it's timing on that, I've given him, we've notice to proceed essentially, but he hasn't scheduled a date to come out. But it should be, I'd expect within the next week or two. But the sooner the better, because we need to get that moving and before the weather gets even lousier. Because right now there's a chance you can see plants that are
Yeah,
decayed.
Blazing Star is actually seeded right now. It's in seed.
Okay,
So once it drops its seed, probably in the next couple weeks, it's hard to tell.
yeah, okay.
So Dan, so how long after his visit will it take him to complete his report? Do we know, or do we have a sense of that, like we talking weeks, month and a half?
No, it should be weeks. It'd probably be a week or two. It doesn't take them that long. I give them a couple weeks. But as part of that, we would then approach Natural Heritage, kind of like I did before. I have a contact there when I had a pre-permitting session with them a few months back. And that's where I kind of learned about the different species we're concerned with at the site. And so we would approach them at that time with Steve's report, with Goddard's report, and try to get a sense of what to expect for the permitting. And then basically the next step will be when we have plans, we would have to kind of put together an application for a natural heritage permit, which would involve, it doesn't have to be a very far along levels of plans, probably what we have a site plan and then something from my office with the corridor, the water and electric. Something to give the natural heritage to say, hey, these are the areas that might be impacted as part of the permit and to move it forward. So that would be the next step after the habitat assessment. So I guess while we're talking about it, so right in here, I put in habitat assessment. And then after that's done, we submit to natural heritage. We talk to them first, and we'll submit to them a permit. If the natural heritage permit, if there becomes what's called a take, you can see under MIPA permitting after natural heritage to the right, I put in parentheses, if a take and 2+ acres of disturbance, that triggers a MIPA permit. Basically, what a take is if the project you are working on has a significant impact to the habitat of the Blandings turtle or the New England blazing star, it's considered a take. And there has to be specific mitigation measures and a plan put in place to protect that habitat and potentially some offsetting the conservation land and things like that. So that's why we kind of don't know exactly yet if we're gonna head down that road. It's possible.
Would you like to tell them what the preference would be on the letter?
What's that?
Would you like to tell them what the preference would be to the take?
The preference would
The
be,
preference would be a no take.
oh, yeah, oh,
So
right,
the letter we're looking for, I'm hopeful for, is a no take.
right, so you submit the application to natural heritage, you either get back a take and they list special conditions, you have to submit a turtle protection plan, et cetera,
So
or no take, and we can move forward with the project with a few measures,
looking for a no take.
yeah.
But if they determine that it is a take, who would provide to them the mitigating measures taken? What?
So Goddard would prepare a plan. It would likely be a turtle protection plan that Goddard would have to put together. And it would involve a scope during construction. So you'd have to have like specific silk fencing,
It'd be on the site.
prevent the turtles. Yeah. And then there would probably be a post-construction potential measures that need to be kept in place.
And do we have funds available to pay for that work? I mean, would it be enough to honor what we have available now?
We would have to use what we have now. It's about 220K, so it's not a lot of money for him to put a turtle protection plan together. So me,
Depends on the turtle.
It's gonna be a no take.
yeah, I've done them on a few different projects, so. Anyway, so we're kind of heading down the permitting road. So there's potential. The only other item with that, and I'd have to talk to Steve and Natural Heritage, and Bonnie kind of touched on it, is the habitat assessment. Natural Heritage may want us to do a survey of the New England blazing star, the plant. And basically the survey is identify where it's located on your site physically. So you'd have to see it during actual blooming season, which is, they say August, I think through September.
Yes, end of September.
Yeah, and so that would be obviously further down into 2025. Now, I don't know what impacts that would have on our project. Would that push us out or not? Can we have, somewhat of a permit, already in place and still be able to bid and go forward with construction? I would aim to do that if we can, but I think I'm kind of getting down hypotheticals far down the road at this point, but.
Is there anything we can do to go on site while they're still possibly there and mark them?
Well, exactly, that's what, so Steve, the sooner Steve from
But
Goddard
if he's
can
not
get out
coming for
there.
several weeks, is there anything we can do to go put a flag?
No, it has to be done by him, because he's licensed, he's a certified biologist, so. I mean, I'll push him to get out here this week, if not, he could be out by next, and he mentioned like the plants are probably dead and decaying, and he said he could potentially find where those are.
The other option is maybe we can ask, so Native Plant Trust, which is part of, the New England, it's the New England Plant Conservation Program through, Garden and Woods. They have like this huge habitat map. Why are you smiling at me? And
It's
they,
not even a high ranked protected plant, do you understand that?
New England Blazing Star,
It's like the lowest rank on the.
That threatened
I sent
list or
him a
whatever.
copy of
Yeah,
that today.
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's look, I mean,
It's just
it's-
of concern, something
So-
like that.
right,
Not
but it's,
endangered or.
it's not endangered, but they may have gone out there. I don't know, they would have probably contacted you guys to
Mhm.
ask permission to get on site to look if they have like a record of it. Because they usually every year they like to go to the same site over and over again to basically do their assessment to,
no, interesting,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah. I don't know.
okay.
So I could reach out to them
Plant
and
trust, okay,
if they've been on site.
and if they might have some data, that would be helpful.
But they wouldn't have been able to access the site without going to DPW, right, unless they climbed the fence.
But they could have done the corridor, maybe, the Carson
Yeah,
Road at
corridor.
least.
Yeah.
In talking to Steve, he says that the New England Blazing Star doesn't really like wooded areas, which most of the site we're looking at is wooded.
Right.
Except when you're along the road area, or potentially near the brush dump. area.
Yeah, they like sandy soil, nice dry sandy soil.
So,
Pine barren.
and kind of, yeah, what you said, Ken, is it's kind of the least, lowest on the.
Yeah.
Threatened list, so, I mean, that's why I'm thinking maybe it's in talking to Natural Heritage, even they say, well, what we try to do is just avoid where the plant is with your design. Or if you're gonna have to go where it is, you just replant it somewhere else, so it seems like an easy fix mitigation, so, you know, I'm thinking hopefully it's something you can. We don't have to hold up a project.
Plants are the easiest to mitigate, you just replant them.
Yeah,
Buy the seed or
Yeah.
plants and replant it, yeah.
so that's kind of the permitting, so that's in progress, that's a, you know, critical variable that we gotta keep on. And then I did work with John, he's on the call, on the building design and the timing of that. And basically, you can see that's the next row down.
Did you just pass this over to us?
No, sorry, he did want to
She just
interrupt.
gave it to
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Listen, but what you look at Ayers,
I know.
you know.
He sent that
I
to
sent it to
me.
Oh,
him.
you did?
Yeah. Yeah, Air is like isolated, right?
Yeah.
The entire town of Air has that thing?
Yeah,
That's- Show it to Dennis, he would appreciate it.
Okay.
He's a government specialist.
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so looking at the building design. So basically, if hypothetically, if we had all the money for the design today, it would take, you know, roughly 6 months to complete the design all the way through from schematic level through to final design completion. So you can see on here schematic design, that's about, I said about a 30% design, it's about a 2-month process. From there, there's a review and then we would go into design development. And so you would just further the design alternative that we've decided to go with and basically. So, and then basically, once the design development's done, the next step will be just final design, so there'd be kind of a review period in between the design development and final design.
There'd
And I-
also be, just as a point, there'd be careful assessment of cost factors. There'd be a full cost estimate at schematic design development and then at about 80 or 90% final design to make sure that we're on track with the budget.
Yeah, that's a good point, John, so in between, at each, when schematic design is finished, there's a cost provided with that, and also when design development is finished.
Can I ask a question to you and John, because it just dawned on me and I made a note to myself. When we talk about the design of the building, are we including the site plan design as the same sequence? Which makes.
Yes. Of course, yeah.
So,
It has to be part of the whole, it's a part of the whole thing, including septic and utilities access.
confusion, if it was just the building, I want to double check everyone understand it includes the entire design.
Yeah,
Everything, Soup to nuts. We can't bid it without it.
So usually, yeah, John, right, usually near the end of schematic design, you bring in your other disciplines, the civil, mechanical.
Yeah, the civil probably comes in a little bit earlier, but all the rest of the folks, we will make them aware of what we're doing because the structural folks might say, oh, can you adjust it this way to get this beam in? But generally, all the disciplines come in at design development. And I think we'll be talking to civil during schematic to make sure we got the parking lot and some of that stuff figured out.
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead.
And so, and between final design and in order to bid the project, how long between the design is complete and the request for bids goes out and the bids come back?
Yeah, you have 2 weeks for advertising in the central register. It's required to be online in the register for 2 weeks. And then we have, depending upon the scope and any complications, we allow 6 to 8 weeks for bidding, where if it's 6 weeks, it's 4 weeks for the file sub bids and 2 weeks for the final GC to put it all together. Sometimes we'll take, it just depends upon the scope. We may go with 5 weeks for subs and 2 or 3 weeks for the general, but generally we can get it done in 6 weeks. But it's advertising is too, so that if you go with a 6, then you got 2 weeks, that's 8 weeks. And then you allow, because the contract is in the spec all done, we work with the town council on that in the front end. There's no negotiation on the contract. We just fill in the numbers. And the file sub bids, you have a chance of having somebody to challenge a sub bid. Generally, the file sub bids are determined by the state regs. Generally, they're miscellaneous metals, HVAC, drywall, painting, roofing, all of that stuff. So it's it generally, if it goes smoothly, it's 8 weeks plus about a week or so to get the contract signed.
So that's what you're showing here, right?
Yeah, so
1625 to 7825, basically that section.
yeah, and so in this, I probably need to get more information on, but based on the procurement chart that I have from the state, when you bid a project over $10 million, there's supposed to be a first phase of soliciting qualifications and a second phase of soliciting sealed bids. And I've never done this before, so I need to just confirm that. But
Yeah, we'll get that worked out with you. We have not, we usually do not pre-qualify, but what Dan is talking about, and I think the numbers have changed a little bit, and I will inquire about that.
Okay.
But what he's saying is that we may have to pre-qualify the generals and probably even the file sub bids. I'll talk to Dan some more about that, but
okay.
we just bid a couple projects that were well over 10 million and we did not pre-qualify.
Okay.
But and that was done through the OPM.
Yeah, so that's required. This would be a little less.
Qualifying would require probably another 3 weeks or so to go through that pre-qualification.
And where in this process does the OPM come on board, or assuming go ahead.
About 2 months ago. Yeah. Anything over a certain amount requires OPM. Now, a lot of communities can provide their own OPM through their staff, but they have to be qualified. But technically, the OPM is involved right from the very beginning. Most towns wait until the drawings are starting, but technically you should be starting earlier than that.
Is there a question that we should raise, Robert, that Dan can be the OPM at all in the future? Are you interested, Dan? Just ask him a question.
We could help you, Dan.
I could help you. Yeah. But he is licensed. He's an
Yeah.
engineer.
I think we could definitely, let's discuss that.
Yeah, then we
It
could.
gets pretty intense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so I think
Now.
through the chair, we should discuss that and report back. Any interest in
Yeah,
time?
okay.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, okay. So that's the building design. The next row, I have the electrical design shown in here, which we're working on now. And the basically the time frame I got on the design and engineering for electrical is in line with the documentation I have from National Grid. And I mean, I guess I don't show permitting along with the electric and the water designs in here, but it's up above and it will be concurrent with those designs going on. So the, any plans from those designs would be built into the permitting. And then also, yeah, on the bottom, I just mentioned the offsite water main design. And Matt in my office is starting to work on that now. Obviously, we need to get the survey from Ross, who's gonna be giving us the survey of the corridor. I know he was doing the lot, but he's gonna do the corridor too. To give that to us so we can design the water main, and I'm trying to get a hold of P&M, because that's gonna be our probably the biggest hurdle, just making sure we get across the tracks with the water main, so just, dealing with the railroad and making sure we meet their requirements. I don't want them to slow us down at all. It's gonna be hard to get a hold of, yeah.
So I did mention. There is a line under there now, we know.
Yeah, it's
It's a small.
essentially like a
small
service
St.
line.
Mary's.
Yeah, small for St. Mary's, I don't know, it's an inch and a half or something, yeah, two, yeah, it's a small one. Yeah, so we do know that.
Is there any information coming from National Grid on the cost estimate? Have that been or not?
No, not yet, so I've submitted some information back to them, but I haven't heard anything, so we're kind of waiting, I gotta give it a nudge, but it's kind of in progress right now.
I think we gave Dan some of that electrical information for,
Yeah, no, that's helpful, yeah,
for the grid.
yeah,
Wait a minute, did you get that already from John?
I did, yeah,
Yeah,
I got
okay.
information from John, that's helping me push it forward,
Yeah, that's easy. That's good.
yeah.
Do
And
you have any idea what he anticipates for like a 6-inch main going down there, or do my size of 8 and just make it big enough so if you have it connected the other way?
yeah, we typically will go with a minimum of an 8,
8, yeah.
yeah, so we'll put it.
Eight is plenty. Yeah, a lot of ours are 6, but you're running quite a long distance. So you might want to go in with an 8, but feeding the building, we only need a 6.
Yeah.
Would any potential further development along that road, do you want to, allow for that in the water main now? Or would it be needed?
I mean, if we did just our standard 8-inch, if there was future development, I don't expect
Pretty
any
good.
development that you need anything larger than that.
8's pretty, it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, it is pretty, right. So, especially in that area where we have good pressure down there. It would just be about the flow really. And like you did mention, the opportunity, if we ever in the future became, in interest of both parties, we could connect in with Evans to have.
They have big lines down the other street.
They do, yeah. So that's kind of it. I didn't, I think I went through these as we were going. I left some notes in the bottom right corner about the habitat assessment. And how it's a, critical item, moving forward to kind of let us know what's involved in their permitting. So I think the good thing is I've already had a meeting with Natural Heritage, so they're already kind of know about the project. So when I go back to the same biologist over there, he'll already be well aware, and obviously it won't be me, it'll be Steve from Goddard, who's been very helpful in another project in town for me.
We
So,
worked with Steve too. He's very good.
yeah. So that's kind of an overview here. Obviously I didn't put in, does this design slide further out? If that happens, there's more cost involved because with time, there's time value of money, there's escalation. The building's the building. It's not like you're designing a bridge and then you go do some borings, you're like, oh shoot, I can't do a box culvert. I gotta do, a bridge on piles and the cost goes way up. But, I think, right, John, you wouldn't expect any significant change in cost based on the current schematics or concepts of the building we have.
No, the information I gave you for power and if I didn't give you for water, we ran 6-inch in our last project in Wilbraham, which is almost exactly this. It's a little bit smaller, I think, but 6-inch is great for water, and the power is I think we have a 250 kW generator, and the power, and that's a whole building generator. So I think we gave you the power diagrams for that. I don't see any problems with that.
So, and then, yeah, so, you know, these are the key items I showed on here, and I didn't show, you know, if like town meeting isn't toward the end of April, that normal town meeting.
That'll be a good segue to me, but.
Yeah. Okay, you want to talk? Yeah, I think that's kind of the overview here. Yeah.
So can I just get clarification? So you're saying there's potentially there will be no change in cost? At this specific timeline?
So based on the cost estimate we have now from Catlin, the only really item that would change the cost is if we go further out in time, escalation. So you know, I was trying to kind of say, there's not gonna be an unknown that pops up that all of a sudden
Yep.
changes the price significantly. You know, it's a building we're gonna design, right? So I think the cost that we've been given so right now from Catlin is a pretty decent cost, even though we haven't done much design work necessarily.
Okay,
It's pretty good one, to use for budgeting purposes. But, yeah.
so can I ask you, sorry, another question? So John, what would be like, in your estimate, like a significant, like, time delay that would modify a cost structure? Is it like 2 months, 4 months, 6 months?
I don't, if we follow, probably it just comes down to funding and getting all those approvals. That's really what holds it up. I don't see, I don't, I've been looking at the weather reports, you know, over the next year or so, and they're calling for a reasonably mild winter. I think construction costs, the only thing that we haven't done deep borings yet, but I know from the test pits that Dan's crew did, the site is really in good material. And I think Dan did some research on the soils in this area. And unless from our borings, we find out we have a peat moss mess down there about 15 or 20 feet, I don't see any reason why we have a problem. We found no large boulders. So I think we're fortunate to have a good site so far. So I don't see any any problems unless, you know, you have another pandemic or something. I don't know. The end of the world occurs. I don't know. I hope not, because we really look forward to getting this built. Humor, guys. Come on, humor.
Yeah, Dan, could you, I had it wrong here, but could you add the borings to that? And I think we can have it done by either anybody, any of the three can do it, or you can do it. Gardy can do it, Ross can do it.
No, Goddard can't do that. They don't do that. You would probably go with
You could easily get somebody.
Yeah, I've used some.
it's just like a guy who drills for wells, you know. We recommend going down 22 feet, and we probably need about 6 borings, whatever we get done in a single day, because the site's open. I don't see a reason why it can't get done in a day.
Yeah, they should go pretty smooth, if
Yeah.
not, well, from what we've seen so far, just sandy material. Yeah. But yeah, if we could,
My engineers will require that, yeah.
That's easy.
Thanks, John.
I put a note in here before too, that we might want to have a traffic study done along the way. As part of our scheme. But, yeah,
mhm. That will come up, yeah.
it may not be a full study, it may just be a traffic report of some sort.
But in Massachusetts, regional.
And we're gonna talk to them about that, yes, Massachusetts.
All right, good.
Katie, do you want me to now jump in on the funding?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Members of the committee, good evening. Linda, welcome. Look forward to working with you. So, a special thanks to Dan and everybody on all the work that we have the schedule here. And so now let's is nothing is ever easy in municipal government. Bear with me, we'll add the next sort of challenge to the schedule. The good news is we have some options and a plan, I think, for the committee to discuss. So just very briefly, I know I did a previous memo that's on the website with sort of a snapshot on the process, but just to recap for everybody's benefit. And I'm gonna just walk us through what I'm gonna call a conceptual scenario. So for the record and for the public, I want to stress, I'm just gonna use the assumptive number of 17.7 million from here, just for the sake of discussion. Just want to be clear that, you know, there's work to be done, but you know, people get held up on numbers, but just for the sake of the discussion. So just for the committee's benefit, real quick, and we touched upon this before, but this is obviously what we would call a capital project, and the main source of funding, as we see it, will come from a borrow, and specifically what we call a debt exclusion. And a debt exclusion in a nutshell is authorization for the town to borrow up to, and that's a key phrase, up to a certain amount of funding over a period of time. Normally, something of this magnitude would be what we call a 30-year borrow. The good news is the committee doesn't have to get all into the weeds on this, because Barbara Tierney, the treasurer, tax collector, finance manager, that's her job on the specifics of the borrowing. The town also has bond counsel, town council, and myself. So we're not going to get way down into the weeds, but conceptually, the majority of this project is going to have to be borrowed. So under state law in Massachusetts and with the town, this would most likely be a debt exclusion. And the debt exclusion has two statutory requirements. It has to be approved, the borrowing up to, so let's say up to 17.7 million. Why I keep stressing that is people ask, well, what happens after the approval if there's a reduction in scope, or we get a grant, or we get some other funding source? The good news is they're just authorizing the treasurer to borrow up to that amount. Barbara would never borrow money we don't need, so, but the maximum ceiling. Two-part process. It has to be approved by town meeting by a 2/3 vote. So there would be a warrant article which would ask for authorization for the treasurer to borrow up to X amount. And that has to pass town meeting by 2/3 vote. And at this town meeting, that's where you would be doing your presentation and so forth as well. If it passes the 2/3 vote at town meeting, it also has to pass a ballot, an election in the town. And so it's a two-part process. It only has to pass by a simple majority at the ballot. And though state law, interestingly, doesn't say what order you would do it in, 9 times out of 10, it makes sense you do your town meeting first, because you have a good captive audience to give all the information, and then you would have the election afterwards. So these are two things that we definitely have to do by statute. Additionally, related to this, the town of Ayer has a capital planning committee. It's an advisory committee that's appointed by the select board, and it is charged with reviewing all capital projects and making a recommendation to the select board. Now, the capital planning, just bear with me, the capital planning committee's recommendation is advisory in nature. Ultimately, the select board would determine if the warrant article would move forward. In the town's financial policies, anything that's over $500,000 is a debt exclusion and needs to go through the capital process. What is that capital process? It is designed, it's another sort of public layer. The committee meets, they review the project, they make certain determinations, which we already do know, but it's an important part of the process. For example, does the town have the borrowing capacity for this project? As we've already talked about, gone on record, the answer is yes. But what people say, well, what's the capital planning committee? And Dan goes through this all the time. It's not necessarily this big, drawn out process. The good news is the capital planning committee knows that this is coming. They're aware of the project and have been generally supportive. So I just want to bring up that piece, the capital piece, which we have a plan for. So what does this all mean moving forward in terms of the schedule? So we're at this point, I call it, it's sort of a great balancing act, and there's some considerations. And I think Dan and all of you have done a great job as we have a defined schedule. So here is, I think what the committee, needs to consider. So you have right now approximately $220,000 remaining. In other words, you've authorized funding for due diligence on things, which is great. So you have, right now, you have $220,000 as available funding. So there are two scenarios we're looking at. I'm gonna call the first one the standard scenario. So there's always exceptions, so.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The 220,000 that you mentioned,
Yeah.
is that minus all the work we've already contracted for at the
Yes,
site?
yes.
Okay.
So all,
That's covered.
correct. So all things being equal, you recently voted to do, which is great, all those due diligence
Yeah,
things.
right.
So all of that, you have 220,000.
Left after
Left,
that.
right.
Okay, good.
So the question, so what I'll call the standard scenario would be, we would send this project to the capital planning committee. The deadline for that is, October 31st. The good news is we're in a position to submit, what you have will be sufficient. Then a normal with the capital planning committee would meet, relatively quickly in November, December. They would review this, and, make a recommendation on it. Additionally, so there are some steps I think they're already doing as part of the budget process. So we definitely want to go through the capital process. I also want to go through the finance committee, which I know that members met with the FinCom recently. I think, in my opinion, once we get everything, tightened up, that's not a criticism. The FinCom's role is also to review projects and funding on behalf of town meeting. And of course, the select board is a key player, and they are aware of this process. So the normal process right now would be submitting this to capital planning, having a meeting with capital planning, have your meeting with the FinCom, the select board, as we go through the budget process. Then what would happen on the standard process is the annual town meeting, it would be the fourth Monday of April, as it is every year. So in Bonnie and S, it's early. So on April 28th, 2025 would be the annual town meeting. So all of this process would have happened. The select board would have recommended the warrant article for the debt exclusion authorization. We'd go to town meeting on April 28th, do your presentation, it'd be the discussion, and then they take a vote and 2/3 vote to authorize it. Then what would happen is the annual town election, which is on May 13th of 2025, is where you'd have the ballot. So town meeting would have happened, 2/3 vote, it would go to the ballot, and the ballot question needs to just pass by a simple majority vote. Once those two statutory boxes are checked, for the sake of argument, you could argue that on May 14th, the day after the election, would be the earliest, we'd tee it up. The authorization to borrow would be available, so you would have the funding. And we'd move forward. Now, here's the challenge, or what I think we need to consider. The question is, on a normal timeline, under that normal route, would there be sufficient funds to get us, to that point? You only have 220,000. It looks like we may need some, additional funding to get to that point. So an alternate pathway, and this has happened, so this will be what we'll call the alternate pathway. We'd still do the capital piece I talked about, that's the same. The meeting with the FinCom, select board through the beginning of that budget process, that's all the same. What we may need to consider is having an earlier town meeting and an earlier election to get all of the funding ahead of time. Now, it was discussed to some extent, or you could say, well, we could go to just a town meeting to get some additional funding, a special town meeting, and then go to the annual town meeting. I think we can all agree the less trips you make to town meeting, I think the better. So what the committee may want to, I think should consider is doing if you did a special town meeting for the authorization in the beginning of, in early February, and I'll come back to the thought on that, and tee up a special election in February as well. Assuming again, the 2/3 vote on the special and a simple majority, it passes, and then the borrow authorization, you would have all of the funding for the project potentially in February. Now, just so the committee knows, how would that work? So the select board, and some of you who've been involved with this longer will remember this because the select board offered this up maybe 2 years ago. The select board can call a special town meeting for any purpose, including this, with a minimum of a 14-day notice. So the select board in a duly posted meeting could call a special town meeting as quickly as 14 days. I think we could all agree would want to structure this, with some time considerations. And the select board can also call a special election for a debt exclusion with a 35-day notice in writing to the town clerk. So again, this could all be teed up and coordinated. And the thought process is where we're coming up already almost on November 1st, to be realistic, the earliest that this could be, I think, teed up, for potential success would be in that February timeline. So if we follow the normal pathway, the concern is twofold. One is the timing as it ties into the funding, and what would that mean for the project schedule? And on the alternate side, the alternate election piece, again, is more of a strategic, what I call a strategic public political consideration. And I do think that this committee should consider going to the select board at their next meeting on November 19th with an update with this scenario, with an update, and to have that discussion and get their feedback. So to conclude, and I'm sure there'll be other, some questions, what I would propose as far as next steps, because I'm a firm believer on next steps, moving things forward. I think next steps would be to further refine the project and the project schedule, which I think Dan has a good handle on, and all of these things can happen simultaneously. Further refine that. Prepare, and I'd be there as well, prepared for November 19th to go to the select board to discuss the project schedule and the funding situation both, and so they're updated and aware, but also have that discussion at that point. We'll prepare, I think, between Katie, Dan, and I, the submission to the capital planning committee, which they know it's coming, to submit it for the capital project. Then the capital planning committees, the deadline is October 31st. Their first meeting will be on November 6th, but at their first meeting is when they just schedule when they want to hear from the different departments of projects. So we would know after November 6th when they would want to meet with the committee. I am actually a member of the capital planning committee. It's chaired by the chairman of the select board, just to give you Chris Tavares, the chair of the finance committee, Kurt Piskowski, who is a member, myself. Jim Pinard, who is a member of this committee, is also a member of capital. There is a couple other resident, Barbara, who I've been talking about, the finance manager, is on there. And so I think that as we continue, to work this, that's what I would sort of suggest as next steps. And the final piece, which I understand you're going to be doing, and I don't want to get off topic, but also I know you're going to be doing some further public outreach and so forth, which I think is important because you'll get feedback, I think, a lot of exciting feedback, positive feedback, and then there's also the good, the bad, the ugly. What I'm saying is you'll get a temperature on on the project cost, and I think that is helpful, because again, that's why I stressed in the beginning. I'm just conceptually calling 17.7 million the maximum ceiling. I'm aware, even this draft stuff, there's some adults, there's some other considerations that this, group needs to make. So I think that is also timely that you're gonna start in earnest that public outreach. So Madam Chair, I'll stop there. My purpose for tonight was to sort of get this information to all of you, and please know, between myself, Dan, my office, Barbara, the finance manager, and so forth, that the committee does have the professional staff support. That's our job, to shepherd us through this, because we're at an exciting phase, I think, of the project, but also a critical phase, in the sense there's a lot of moving parts and considerations as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's a great summary and sets us up perfectly to discuss as a committee. What does everyone think about those two pathways, the two timeframes?
I just know, yeah, quickly, so the schedule I put together here is like it's the ideal schedule. And it's really because I did mention, the sooner we work, the less escalation there is on the project, so the less lower the cost, but also it kind of gets you toward construction before winter of next year. So you can get the shell of the building and the foundation in the ground, so you're good to start working through the winter. So that's why, that's kind of I just want to point that out here for everybody.
And then I have a question regarding the cost. So we have $220,000. What does that cover out to the town, the April town meeting?
Yes, and so John, let's correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would get us through schematic design close to that point at this time. So if you look at it there, now you're towards the end of December. So you've got kind of, if you do the special town meeting in February, you got about a month and a half or 2 month gap where we don't have any funding to further the design. And then if you went all the way up to the April town meeting, then you're really, 4 or 5, 5 month, because it's really May when the ballot is, right? Where you're kind of just unable to move forward. So that's kind of roughly where the 220 would get you.
And that's the rub, if you will. That, in my opinion, for what it's worth, if we went the standard pathway, what's happening is it's pushing all of this out longer, including probably missing the construction benchmark before the winter, but also, as you touched upon, Bonnie, pushing out where now you're getting into escalation territory and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's why we're looking at or proposing this alternate pathway where, and Dan, I think, just hit it great, that there'd be about, if all things go equal on his schedule, we could get through the schematic design, and then there'd be about maybe a month. I don't want to say lost time, because things can happen, but a month gap to the authorization of the funding, as opposed to almost a 4 to 5 month before the spring.
Yeah, and this assumes, I guess, starting schematic design before November 1st. We're already almost there now.
So I didn't even know that John we can't award a contract just for schematic design, can we?
Sure you can. We'll just award it through that phase. And the good thing about the schematic design is it really now ties down, allows my cost estimator to look at and say, yeah, you're still on track, for the numbers. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I think it's really important, is that our greatest success for getting it through the town process is at special town meetings versus the general town meeting. The reason for that is because Katie will, along with your committee and others, will certainly get that meeting filled up with people who really want to have this. And you'll have a few folks, as you do in all town meetings, that will complain and cause a little havoc. But in a general town meeting, there's a lot of stuff coming up. And there might be another budget plan thing coming in, and that will really kind of thwart a successful vote at the town meeting. So special town meetings are, we've been very pleased with the results of those in my 15 or 20 of these that we've done in Massachusetts. So that's just my thought.
One of my concerns is that delay that is increasing time increases uncertainty. I mean, the longer that you wait from a particular point to a point in the future, that distance, to the extent that we can narrow that distance, I think it works well for certainty in terms of the cost estimates, the lack of escalation, any exogenous event that may or may not occur. You know, the railroad goes on strike, the concrete plant blows up. So to the extent that we can move forward expeditiously, I think it increases the reliability of the current estimates that we have, because they're closer in time to previous building projects which have been done that are quite similar. It decreases the likelihood of increasing escalation costs because of increasing contingencies needing to be carried. So, I mean, my view is, to the extent, I mean, the political strategic aside, to the extent that we can move the project forward, I think we are serving better the needs of the community, that we can try to keep the costs where we think that they are going to fall. And extending it out in time increases the unreliability, I think, of any potential future costs.
In John's point, and thank you, John, I forgot to mention that there is something, and I think the select board way back had also said this as to why they were offering up the concept of a special town meeting to begin with, is the importance of this project, that it's the focal point, that there's ample time for this committee and others to make the appropriate presentations. Whereas you've all been to the annual town meeting, you've got the omnibus budget, you've got 37 other items. So I appreciate, and John has much more experience on the project front with town meetings, so that's good to hear. That's sort of the sentiment we have.
I don't know.
My concern, I agree that is the great way to go and say, okay, let's start designing. But we haven't gotten much feedback yet. We haven't gotten feedback from the public. We haven't gotten much feedback. I guess Katie probably went back to the finance committee. When we went to them the first time, all they said was, we'll take it under advisement. And I wasn't here for whenever they followed up, and we haven't heard anything from the capital committee. So we're just going with the idea that everybody's gonna go along with this. And it makes me nervous, because nothing usually is ever that easy. And particularly looking at Peroni Park and everything. So I don't know, I mean, Katie, did you go to the finance committee? Did they give it any kind of approval?
I did, yes, along with Ken, and we had a great, oh, and Dennis, I'm sorry, Dennis was there as well. I think we had a really great discussion. They had drafted up a list of 5 or 6 questions that they had for us, and then we were able to easily answer those. You know, obviously there's still research on their part that I think that they want to do, but they were, I think, receptive to the responses we had. Ken, do you want to offer any?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, but that's, our expectations were met when we went. I think we clarified a few points that were either misunderstandings by us or them. The appropriate information was given, and now we just go back to them when it's appropriate again.
And to Ellen's point regarding public, I mean, the general sense I have gotten from the seniors in town is that they are very excited and supportive of this. When we were at the Newton Street Fair, there were many people whom I have never spoken with before regarding the project who stopped by the booth and were generally supportive. I know that we would like to do something in November, kind of at, you know, a public at the town hall kind of thing, well advertised. That brings more people, so I certainly want the public to be well informed. And I think that to the extent that we can, between, let's say, November 1st and a special town meeting in the beginning of February, to the extent that we can condense that information into that, I think it works well for both the public and for the purposes of getting the building built. So what I would say is that I think the general reception of the public has been positive, although not unanimous. But the number, the sticker shock number, which people may rebel against, is not going to be smaller later.
No, it's only
And
gonna get bigger.
it's only going to get bigger. So,
And I would echo that as well, that the people I spoke to at the Newton Street Festival, and again, at the flu clinic at the library, were all folks that I hadn't really interacted with before. So they were mostly seniors, obviously, but they were all quite positive about it, excited about the potential of the building. In each of those cases, I told them the price, both the total price and the estimated increase for the average household. And I didn't really get any negative feedback. Most people said it seemed reasonable. Obviously, that's a small sample. We have a lot more public input and public feedback to do. We're going to have our first one on November 7th at 7 p.m. in the Great Hall upstairs there at Town Hall. And then I anticipate that, and we'll be at town meeting, outside of town meeting with some handouts for people as they go in to review in preparation for November 7th. And I think that's going to be the first of many sessions. And the good thing is that does give us some time between, November 7th and, in February to, if there's any modifications that need to be made, we can be working on those.
So does that assume that you're going to then go ahead now and approve the money for the design, or wait until after that meeting?
We gotta think more to think about than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd have to award the contract first, right? That we'd have to draw that up. So I think they
Yeah,
might go inside just fine. The timing might work out okay on that.
yeah, so the schedule I put together, I should have prefaced, this is kind of a living document, a working schedule. And if you go with what Robert just said of a town meeting in February, and we say the 220 only gets us through schematic design, we talked about that month and a half, 2-month lag of not being able to do anything. So why don't you move that month and a half, 2-month lag to right now? So then that gives you, time to be doing further outreach before we sign a contract and begin the design, the schematic design.
Well, add,
You know what I'm saying?
add a section here that talks about the public outreach.
Yeah, we could add that to here, right, right.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I was just thinking, that
That's
gap
great.
in time when you're done with schematic design, around Christmas time. Till the February town meeting, you don't have any money to do anything, well, why don't we shift that gap in time to right now to do further outreach?
That's what I was thinking
And,
too.
and before you pull the trigger on the starting, plus Katie did mention, we do have to, go through a contracting process and everything with Catlin, yeah.
Yeah, my only comment, and this sounds a little self-serving, so I'll be very careful here. My only comment is that the schematic design it gives us the ground, if you will, the foundation of the building. So we're feeling we're tracking the money better. I'm a little nervous about, I don't mind what Dan suggested, that we slide it up. But I think if the money's available, and we had a little bit of money left over that we haven't used in the original contract. It involved us doing a town meeting presentation, but I don't mind combining that into this package. I would recommend that we at least get I'd love to be able to get all we got right now is pretty colored diagrams and nice renderings. I would really like to get to the point where my structural engineers and other folks have a little bit better handle on it. So I feel more comfortable with our number, which we're going to end up putting out there. And the number may be a little bit less. I'm trying to be conservative on that number, and I think Ken had reviewed it pretty carefully too. It could be two things might happen. One is that we might be able to get a little bit tighter number, and it could be up or down, but preferably more down. But and as we discussed about the Springtown meeting, that really shifts us into escalation in winter. But if we can do the February 1, how we start the contract, it's not, we'll do whatever you wish to do. I would love to get a little bit of a handle on getting the drawings more. There's a
Yeah.
big difference between a schematic drawing, I mean, a feasibility drawing and the real hard thing that we're basing the whole, and our software allows us to begin the building, and it doesn't really change from that. We just keep building on it. So it's just my thoughts about whether we start, we could wait a few weeks or we can wait till some of the other groundwork is done. But that's just my thoughts, is that it would be nice for us to have a really good set of foundation drawings.
I gotta get in. So Dan, when you use the word, and John, this is for you, when you put the word schematic design building 30% on your, are you thinking that's separate from the contract we have now? Because we do have language in this for some schematic design.
Yes, it's very different. The feasibility study is a feasibility study. It's really, it's getting your program down into a thing that you can all agree to. When schematic drawings, when it comes to working drawings, is basically the beginning of final design. They call them now schematic design, design development, and final design. In reality, from the very beginning, it's final design. It just builds, because in the old days, we used to draw schematic drawings and then we throw them away and draw the next one. This one builds on the software from the beginning, and it's all modeled. It's a very different animal. The Revit is, it's so sophisticated that I have no idea how it works.
Yeah, when I was,
So,
Go ahead.
the contract we have right now, we're not developing schematic designs. We're developing maybe concept plans.
It's a feasibility.
I know that, but I'm reading the contract.
Yeah. It's all semantics.
Okay.
Don't take it too seriously.
I know what the sequence is.
So what would be taken to the town, the Great Hall for public review, for public?
You mean for town meeting or?
No.
So, well, Katie, you can chime in as well. I think that we want to, we have the physical renderings of the building, what it's gonna look like. We have floor plans,
We have some site plans.
which are fairly detailed about how big the rooms will be.
And what we're really bringing to the town is an educational component as well. What the existing senior center is like, what a senior center does in general, how our existing senior center doesn't allow us to achieve that mission, doesn't fully serve the seniors in town, and what we need in a modern senior center, and then showing them this work that we've done, the feasibility study, how we can solve that issue with this building. Because I think we do have to do some public education about.
Start from basic
Yeah.
problem, right from the.
And if I may, Katie, just quickly, I think, and you guys have done an excellent job. I think what's going to also, to Ellen's point, what's going to start to happen, and it's not unique to this project, it's any public project. As you do the public outreach, all of the things Katie said is going to occur, but you want to be prepared too. People are going to start to ask, what is the total cost for this? And it comes down to, we know that the town has the capacity, that it's affordable, the mechanics of the town, but affordability, right, is often very personal, depending on who you talk to. That I think you're going to start to hear, and everybody has an opinion on this, if it's 17 million, how much is that gonna be? And we have ways of calculating that out to an extent. But I think we just as a town, need to just be prepared to begin to hear that, because there are going to be people that will show up. How much is it going to cost? Oh, that's too much. And that's their opinion, right? Because at the end of the day, town meeting, it comes all down to mathematics as to who shows up and who doesn't, right? John touched upon that. But it's about getting the people there, but we will begin to, I think, very quickly, at least begin to get some feedback. And I don't think it's all gonna be negative, by the way, on the cost piece. It depends on who you talk to. And that's normal for any project. I mean, whether we do a capital on a bridge, any public project, everybody has an opinion and they're entitled to on that. The question becomes as we move forward, is it at a point where we need to have to potentially adjust sales? I'm not saying we're at that point. You know, you wanna come out with the maximum optimal project for the seniors, which Katie was talking about. And that's the goal, to get across the finish line. But I think we can also just, I think can all agree, also have to be pragmatic, because a failed project, we don't get it passed, doesn't benefit anybody. And if we need to trim the sales in some fashion, and this does happen, we need to be prepared to do that in a thoughtful way. And we're not at that point yet. That's all, you know, there are add-ons, is other considerations, you know, in the project. And the other thing is we are actively looking at other funding pieces. That's why I kept saying that up to point is key, because this has happened before too, that the authorization could be up to, but then we do get a grant or a grant that's in process for $2 million from the state or something, and that shaves that down. We're actively, and there are naming rights, by the way, if anybody wants to write a check tonight, right, Katie? But so we are actively, the town, and you all know this, I'm saying it more for the record, actively also looking at all, you know, other funding options.
So if I could ask, so with the February special town meeting timeline, the hope would be that we could get the building started and potentially weather tight before winter sets in, so then they could work inside through the winter, or something more likely approximating that?
I think there's two goals. One is earlier, we avoid moving into the cost escalation world, right? And as Dan has said earlier, in an ideal world, all things being equal, if you can get the shell and you know, in before the winter, that would be a huge step forward too. But I think the biggest concern is, from my vantage point, without the special election, you're going to move this whole thing into the cost escalation point. And I think that's a key point to the select board on this, and that's gonna cost significant.
Right. I agree.
I'd like to go for minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Based on the experience that I've had in town government and other committees, I believe February is going to be impossible. I can tell you why, specifically, because just having planning board meetings and other meetings the last few nights, people are already talking about not having meetings in December, second half of the month, they don't get anything done. You know, all these, you're just starting to hear all that. We're gonna have difficulty getting everybody organized and getting it done and do what we have to do by that time. I would think March, maybe, something like that, you know, maybe another month after that might make some kind of sense, but the biggest issue that I have is kind of in tune with Ellen, only it's more financial. I want to make sure that everything on the environmental side of that land is covered before we go to town meeting. So, I mean, we can at least say, you know, we've done all that stuff. Yeah, there's a planning, whatever it is, and it's going to be in the permitting process, but I don't want anybody to have a chance to step up and say, oh, wait a minute, there's this, you know, there's a spill over in Devon's and it's got PFAS and all that stuff that got killed, you know, 5 years ago. So my biggest concern is, and I'm glad we already started, I'm glad Dan and I worked together, we've got it going already, because we're gonna get that stuff linked. But I wanna be able to feel confident that when I go in there, there's no chance that anyone can comment on the land being inappropriate, so that's a big part of it. And I guess I not being in the public world enough, not, you know, educated enough on the bidding process. I understand the process, you know, the file sub bids and contracting bids and prevailing wage and all the other stuff. What I'm trying to determine is if we can, how positive can we be, you know, when we go to that town meeting, whatever the number might be, that we can answer questions. And I guess we have to depend on John at that point and his estimating, and that's basically where we are, but I just feel that I think the comment, I go back to the finance committee. One of the apprehensions the finance committee had was that we were moving too fast. So some people in town think we're moving under the radar kind of, we have to offset that concept. You know, that we're not moving too fast, we're moving in the appropriate speed.
Mm.
And there's a cost savings by moving fast, you know, so I think we need to get the message out a little more, but I'm speculating that it'll be March rather than February, because I think that's pretty aggressive.
And it could be, just real quick, we would just, the earliest it could be,
Yeah,
would be February. And your points are well taken. It's ultimately gonna be up to you and the select board.
it's hard to get everybody organized, get them together on the same page, agree with everything.
I mean, my sense is that from the information that we have now, based on John's experience with a similar building, based on the work that Dan and his people have done regarding the site, that there are no deal breakers that we are aware of. When the borings are done, that will further, we hope, confirm that there are no deal breakers. Hopefully, there is not a uranium deposit that the Army left there in 1960 that is gonna be found, and that. Not to discount that it couldn't happen, but I think that we have to move forward based on what we know. There are always gonna be questions. That is, there are always questions that can't be answered. That we can't prove, that is, if somebody stands up at a town meeting and says, what about this particular endangered species? If it's not relevant to the project. That is, I think we've covered all the possible contingencies.
Close, really close.
Yes. Any kind of contingent, anything that someone at town hall may mention as, but what about?
Well, we already have people saying that because they don't understand the concept of breaking the A&R lot off. I say DPW land, oh, let's go water on it, it's in a floodplain. Well, that's the reason we snuck it over here in this section. We have to get that across, that where exactly it
Yes,
is.
and I think that in the process between now and whatever town meeting we go to. We will cover those issues,
Yeah.
but I fully expect at town meeting to have someone stand up and ask one. That is just kind of out of left field, and we're gonna have to have the confidence to say.
Yeah.
We have thought of all the relevant ones. It's a great question that you're asking, but it's not relevant to this project. And therefore, you should vote to approve it.
Right, well, I think before you go into any town meeting, you anticipate. Numbers of questions that will come from the public, right, and you have an answer. I mean, I agree with you, I think the timeline is very, very. Short, and I know December, I mean, I could come to the number of meetings, right, you're 2 meetings per month, it's only basically 6 meetings until a special town meeting. Is that enough time? It could be if we really are diligent about saying yes to attend these meetings. But that's not necessarily.
The procedure for this, excuse me, the procedure for the special town meeting, you said they could potentially call within 2 weeks. That's typically not done for a project like this.
Right.
That's
No,
done for
correct.
some kind
That's
of
what I-
emergency funding.
That's what I,
Something like that.
right,
It's not a long-term, well thought of.
no, and I said that,
project.
I said that in the beginning, you're right. The minute, just giving you the facts, but correct, you would never, and you wouldn't do that on this either.
Right, but I would anticipate giving a month and a half, 2 months notice before that special town meeting.
Right.
I would
Yeah.
not anticipate doing it with 2 weeks' notice, I would anticipate doing it, announce it sometime, let's say, sometime around mid to late December. That at the beginning of February. Or mid-February, we're gonna have a special town meeting, and again, this is not. We have been doing this for a year or a year and a half, you know, this committee, all,
This one, yeah.
yeah, but in the,
Yeah,
all the. That is, we're not starting now, there have been any number of public meetings, and John has been involved in many of the meetings with the design, and Katie has done outreach at the senior center. Over the last 6 months and preceding it, on our previous project. So there has been substantial amount of public information available to the public, which we have put out regarding the building of a new senior center. We're not starting today and hoping that, and again, capital planning is gonna need to be kept informed. Obviously, Kurt's committee has been brought into the loop.
I think that one of the things that happens is that, and I make this mistake on my own because I'm so involved with what's going on in the town. But I learned right there at Newton Street, how many people never heard of it. How many people came up to us and said, have you picked the land yet? You know, we worked on it, what, for a year to find the land. So even though we believe that we're outreaching and we're having all these meetings, the public's not getting it. It's not reaching all the way out there. It's reaching the critical people that need to know, but not necessarily the whole town.
Well, I just want to address this issue that we're working too quickly. Because I was part of it in 2018.
Oh, yeah.
When we had a person that came in and did all this. Finding out what the seniors wanted and big meetings and then started looking and put together some designs and then, you know. It's been going on a long time. I'm 75. So that was 6 years ago. I don't want to wait another 6 years. I may not still be here to use this senior center. I mean, there's an age factor.
Yeah, there is.
With the group that we're trying to support here. So we have to work quickly because anything can happen. You're right. I mean, I wouldn't mind if it went to March. I don't really want to see it go another 6 months after that, not only for the money, but it will take so much longer to get into any type of a building that's really functional. What we have now is not in the least functional. I'm thinking we should do a video of that room and let people see what it's like, but I do think in the next month, we need to concentrate on public outreach, every way, shape and form we can do that to get more people in them. And I don't think we should be telling people we've been working on this for a year, because we haven't. We've been working on this since 2018.
Yeah, no,
And it's
we
been
all
set aside,
We all-
and some people don't realize that. So, anyway,
Yeah, and just to clarify, when coming in, just a all conceptual proposal, an excellent point, and I do agree with Ken. The takeaway is that the earliest would be February. Would it be in March? Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why I still think is one of the next steps. The committee should go to the select board on November 19th and have a discussion about this. I'm gonna call it this dilemma, or this challenge. The challenge is okay, if we follow the normal course, which we can do, except the implications is it's going to move it into the cost escalation zone. It's gonna move everything back, and the implication is cost. But on the flip side, again, doing as Ken said, February too early. That's why I said in the beginning, we've got a lot of things to sort of think about and discuss. The committee does, but I think going to the select board with an update on this situation on November 19th, I think is a positive thing, because if it's their input, it's also a public meeting, so people can see sort of this challenge that we have.
So, Katie, can I ask, the November 7th public forum? Would it be appropriate to, at that time, schedule another one for, mid or let's say second week in December? Kind of.
Sure, I think that I think we're going to need to put out a series of them, and there will be other opportunities for community engagement in addition to those as well. Like, for example, the downtown Halloween event. There's maybe maybe we could be an additional station down there, reach a different set of residents, younger families for that. There's the holiday stroll. There's, I think we can do a mix of large and small input sessions. So yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
and I've been collecting the name of the names of groups in town, that one of them was the Rotary Club, and I understand that Jimmy's a big person with that, and set up for a meeting with that group and other groups in town that we can go to. And one of the person who was in Groton when they opened up that center said almost every night she did what she called her dog and pony show, where she went out to all these different groups and neighborhood meetings and everything else. You know, with her slideshow and all to explain it. So I think that's what we need to focus on over the next month or so.
We should be going to committees too, like, I think of, you know, CPC is one that we should really talk to right away, you know, community preservation. We don't necessarily have to go to conservation, but we could go just as an informational deal, but any committee in
Yeah.
town that has people who will go to town meeting, they'll all go to town meeting.
I'd say a recommendation with the stormwater enterprise work group we had a similar timeline to this, but it was mostly public outreach. And we put it on the timeline and we said, you know, we had the November 6th or 7th, whatever it is, you know, public forum you're doing. We said, we're gonna go to these committees on these days to present. You know, any other items, we had tax bill inserts, things like that, so kind of add that in here and then keep this as a living document, maybe like Dennis suggested, having a second public forum, maybe have it in here, but then next time we meet, hey, do we need to have that forum or not? And we did the same thing with the stormwater work group, and it seemed to work really well. So I think that'd be a good idea as time goes on, and you know, I think at every meeting, this timeline should be updated, this schedule.
That's great.
Show where we're currently at. Hopefully Bonnie could get that.
Yeah.
Help me, help out with that would be
And I
great.
would anticipate doing one, typically the town warrant is mailed out, let's say, 2 weeks prior to the town meeting, give or take a few days. Between the mailing of the town warrant and the town meeting, might be another time where you could reach out to the public. Because you will have more time to discuss the intricacies of the particular warrant article there than on the floor at town meeting. Where control of the presentation passes from, in this case, Katie, to Mr. Tillis. And so, I mean, that may be another time where people who haven't potentially heard about it now see the warrant, see what's on the warrant, and if they have questions, we could then reach out to them.
So my suggestion would be, Ellen and I had met to go over the documents that were the public outreach documents we were drafting, and I've got to make another round of edits to those. Is there maybe one other member of the committee that would want to meet to discuss those, and we could put together a timeline, and then Deanne or Bonnie, if we got you that timeline, you could insert it into this larger document?
Yeah.
Yeah, between us, we could
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's on the website too, but and then before the meeting that we had with finance or whoever, I looked at it, I thought it was great. Thought it was really, you know, a nice thorough presentation taken right from the start, you know, the reason why we need it, the whole setup and whatnot.
Yeah.
It can always be improved, but it was not missing much.
And I think that the one pager that could be handed out at the town meeting coming up.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's a kind of a handy little, touches all the big points.
Yeah.
So Katie, if you need help, I would be interested in doing public outreach. So the 2 towns that I've worked for, I've had a lot of exposure to public outreach. I've done a lot of presentations, and it's something that I think I could add value to.
Right.
I mean, I just heard the conversation tonight, I have a couple ideas.
Right.
Great.
Just maybe expanding our public outreach, group that we're trying to reach might be important.
Yeah,
But if you need help,
that'd be super.
That would be fantastic. So I'll be in touch with the two of you to get a meeting for maybe hopefully early next week to further refine that.
I want to bring up a question for the committee, which I think we have to get to. So we don't have everybody here, but Are we in a position, or are we comfortable enough to come to a vote that we would say, this is it, this is the budget that we're gonna stick with going forth, the town meeting, everything else? I mean, we have to have a consensus amongst the group that we're gonna say. So for instance, in this, we still haven't, you know, Dan and I put $1.5 million for the utilities, the water and electric service and so forth. We're gonna try to get that down, but maybe that's a little slough, you know, but.
So, I mean, again.
But there has to be a point, we reach a point where we say we have a consensus.
So speaking as one committee member, I think that this is a good faith, reliable estimate of what this building should cost based on what we know right now and what John has supplied us with. It is a similar building to others John has designed and built. So he is, so the reliability of his estimates have to be considered pretty good based on their relatively recent similarities with previous buildings. You have obviously gone through it well and have confirmed the numbers and have looked at it in significant detail. The cost per square foot that this comes out to, and again, I know the shock value, a little over $1,000 a square foot, is consistent with similar municipal buildings that are being built in Massachusetts right now. The most obvious analogy is the senior center that is being built in Littleton now, which is currently half finished. But their cost per square foot came in at, I want to say, like $1,100 a square foot. So the total project cost is consistent with what we know about building costs in Massachusetts at that time. And the specifics of this particular building are consistent with very similar buildings that John. So all of this to say that I am comfortable saying that we have performed the necessary due diligence to say that this is a good faith estimate of what this building should cost. And I would be willing to say that on the floor of town meeting that.
I have a question. I keep getting thrown off by the alternate to bid separately. And I think some of these things are really important. Are those things, the pickleball courts, that to me is not the most critical, the multi-purpose room partition. Without that partition, we can't really be having meals on one side of that partition and then general exercise on the other side. So I think that's pretty important. And also the outside roof system to have a walking track around the building, which is one of the things we've been talking about to advertise, you know, the benefits of the building. But if we're not gonna have it, then we can't really do that.
I think John took the liberty of making that list, and we'll decide if they're in the base bid or not. Is that right, John? Well, as we go along.
Yes, that's correct. Actually, those numbers are in this current price now, I believe.
You're in.
So that 17
They're in the
includes
total.
those.
Oh, yeah.
Includes all those.
I think it's important, I mean, not necessarily pickleball court, but that separator in the multi-building and the roof around the building, I think are pretty critical.
Yeah, and also the roof around the building you can add later. The partition, if for some reason, for budget reasons, it doesn't get done right away. It's just it's a kit of parts. The structure that holds it is all in place. And so, you know, that's why we had those as add alternates. If for some reason the budget, you know, doesn't meet that, it's designed so that you can add it in at any time. Often at the end of the project, you have leftover contingency money, you just put it in. It's not a big deal. But you're right. The whole idea is to try and keep all that stuff in there.
Yeah, and I had a question actually on, can we go to that? His red notes on some itemized budget. So I got the breakdown from you for the budgets. You have this, you know, the total project, the TCP. You had an item right near the top that said owner's contingency 5%.
Yes.
And then I included it in the number that I did as well when I summarized the categories of the scope of work, the divisional work. Then you put another one at the, recently, when you came back, you said contingency needs to be included, carry 600,000.
I didn't see how you included it. It wasn't clear to me. If you did have it in there, I want to carry it as a line item, not as a, not included in the, basic estimate. Should be, if you want to pull it out as a line item. That's an item that is for unforeseen conditions and situations and errors and omissions, quite honestly, but
I know why I had it now, because the summaries that I got from the other projects that I used to develop this division of work,
yeah,
that note was in there that it said overhead and profit, P and P, bond, and contingency were general conditions that all were in those line items, the separate items, instead of.
yeah, that's not in those. We carry that the estimator doesn't see our well, I asked the estimator when he does the complete detailed one, he carries that as a line item that we see at the bottom. It's not in the P and O and the general conditions.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
It adds up to
Just a misunderstanding.
it's 5% in there already.
Yeah.
We're working on this.
Yeah.
But the answer to Ellen's question is we're trying to put everything we possibly can in there.
Yeah,
And try to
good,
save.
because I don't
pockets
wanna
go along.
come along and say, oh, it's
Yeah.
gonna be 600,000 more.
Exactly.
All right, so to Ken's earlier question, does the committee feel like we want to take a vote about either the cost or the timeline or both? We are missing 3 committee members this evening.
I would say the cost is gonna get further refined as we go, and I wouldn't vote it until we're getting really close to having a town meeting and we have the most refined number we have.
Yeah, the real idea is once the the first phase of the final design, which is, we call it schematic,
Yeah.
that gives us a much more detailed dimensioned building where all of the pieces, the electric room, the fire pump room, all that stuff is in there. And my engineers I've already notified them to start looking at the feasibility study with any comments they might have. But that first phase of the drawings, which you've got close to the right amount of money, it's a little shy, but it's not a big deal. That allows us to have a really tight, we know what the footprint is, period. The concrete, all that stuff falls into place.
To Ken's point, so the question is, for the November 19th select board meeting, what is our ask of the select board at that time? And I guess, do we want to vote on refining that? Or do we have exactly what it is we are asking the select board to do on November 19th?
I would suggest that we treat November 19th as an informational update to the select group. So no action, no vote even from them, because they won't take any action on the 19th with respect to the special town meeting. But I think it's important for the select board and the public, granted, this is a public meeting, but I think at that meeting, for the select board to be given a brief update as to where the committee is with the project overall, because we've done a lot of great things. And then just have a brief discussion, and we'll all be there about sort of this, I don't want to call it a conundrum, but this issue of the timeline and the funding piece. And that way, so as the committee moves forward to refine this, it's not going to be a surprise to the select board. It's on their radar screen.
Right, but in terms of the timeline, if we are in fact looking at special town meeting between February and March, and we want to give the select board, we want to help the select board understand that we have taken this responsibility seriously, and we are not in fact rushing it.
Yep.
The longer the time distance between us going to the select board and this, so if we don't ask for a date on November 19th, now we're asking for a date at a select board meeting sometime in December.
Yep.
So that's kind of, I think I want, so what all I would say is that I think it's important that the select board understand that we want to give the public as much information and as much time to,
Absolutely.
and to the extent that we can ask for a specific date, it's all to the good.
I think you say it just like that at the meeting, so I think for the 19th, through the chair, for what it's worth, the purpose of the 19th is twofold. One is to give them and the public a general update of the things that you've done since the last time. But more importantly, and we'll all be there to explain, you know, this is where we're at with the timeline, and this is the challenge we have. This is the timeline schedule, and this is the funding. And we take this very serious, all the stuff that was said tonight in a condensed version there. And that we are considering all options, which include a special town meeting. That the earliest it could be, in Ken's, just for the sake of discussion, the earliest realistically would be February. But perhaps more realistically in March. And that's the goal on the 19th. And there'll be some give and take. They will appreciate the update. It puts it on their radar screen. And knowing the board, they wouldn't vote. If you went in there and had a specific date, they still wouldn't vote on the 19th. They would do it in December. Because they'd want to take it under consideration and what have you. Because it's a big deal.
But at some
And the
point,
advantage to December, the advantage to coming back to talk to them again in December is that we may have some of this environmental stuff done by then as well.
Yeah.
And have a better sense of
so in
timing.
December, we will have, that is, I think that the select board will want a recommendation from us about what date we think we can have all our ducks in a row for the meeting, and our due diligence has been done sufficiently to warrant a special town meeting. So at some point, we, the committee, I think, are gonna have to recommend to the select board, this is the date we think works best for all parties.
And I
That's a
think,
month away. We should be able to get that done by then.
I was just gonna say, I think you still have another meeting, you still have another month to shape a lot of stuff. And you're still on target, but I do think for the 19th, the update, which we've sort of had the dress rehearsal for, will be good. And then we will still submit the conceptual project, because I know it's coming, to the capital planning committee for October 31st. So it meets the deadline, and then the capital planning committee will meet on November 6th, at which time they will schedule when they want to meet. So this group will know when they're going to take up the project, and they'll coordinate that.
And Madam Chair, and Kurt, could I ask, does the finance, do you have anticipate any questions or in terms of the finance committee seeking additional information or how they would like to be addressed as this process moves forward? Do you have any words of wisdom or suggestions?
At this point, I feel the committee members have expressed their concerns clearly, and they've been answered clearly also. So as an advisory committee, I think our next step is to observe. There's going to be the public meeting on the 7th. Capital planning is going to be brought into play. The select board is going to be communicated with. So I think we've done our initial assessment well, and now we need to wait for more information and then circle back and see if we need an update.
Okay, all right, thanks for that.
All right, wonderful. So, is there any other discussion about the timeline and?
I have a question on the timeline.
Yeah.
Dan, when do you think the earliest the assessment or the borings could be completed?
Borings, we could get up there, but within the next month, I think I just gotta procure a, make sure that they have time to do it, a driller. Yeah,
So nothing would really be ready until the December meeting for
for the board, yeah.
You
Probably,
you mean before the select board meeting on November
Like-
19th?
I'm just curious if anything would be done before the November meeting or. if-
oh, the November meeting.
So, no, or is it gonna be?
Yeah,
Not
I don't think I'll
till
have the report from the driller
Yeah.
yet, they probably would have drilled, and I would know what
Yeah.
happened. So we would have an idea for John, and to know if there's any big issue with the soil.
No one was standing there with them when they're doing it, whether there's a problem or not.
What's that?
We're gonna know when we're standing there with the driller.
Yeah.
He's doing
Yeah, and obviously I would check it.
it.
Yeah.
If you hit oil, let
Rough
me know.
answer. Yeah, exactly. Or some unexploded
We have to
ordnance.
do it before the ground's frozen,
So they
so
can
that
do
isn't
anything.
absolutely
I
terrible.
think I'd go
So they didn't have it last year.
Yeah, you better to do it before they froze. Can do it.
That road.
But it'll probably-
Trees out there, it's all sandy, gravel.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I'll get that moving.
So you know the call for that, you got someone to
There's,
call?
there's a couple firms I've used in the past, so I'll throw it out there. Probably be whoever has the, most availability. Or quickest availability.
Good.
We'll have to give Dan a layout where we want.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll do a maximum number and we'll do it in by priority in case they can't get them all done in a day.
Yeah, I'll connect with you, John.
Wonderful. So in terms of, well, I think actually, before we go to public input, I just want to recap some of the tasks that we have laid out. The town manager is going to report back on, you guys were going to discuss about when to bring on the OPM. I believe that was in the very
So
beginning.
Dan, Ken and I will talk about that and report back on the OPM piece.
Okay. Great. And then Dan is going to nudge National Grid and reach out to Pan Am and add the borings and a potential traffic study to the timeline. And then let's see, Katie, Dan, and Robert are going to submit the capital request.
Yeah,
I will draft the select board update for the November 19th meeting.
Yeah.
We're gonna make the adjustment for the schematic design for that gap to push that further back. And then John, you were gonna get the locations of the borings. Did I miss any of the tasks there?
So the November 7th public forum,
mhm.
oh, did you mention that?
Yes. So I'm gonna invite Linda and Ellen to a meeting to further refine for that meeting, and I will make the changes that we discussed. That I've heard feedback from a couple of people on that one pager so that they'll be ready for Monday night.
All right. Hey, do you need help in the booth at town meeting, before town meeting, or who were you anticipating having there?
Yeah, I think any of the committee members are welcome to come. I'm not exactly sure what the layout will be, but I know that we'll have some space and we'll have room for the 4 easels. So any of the committee members that would like to come for that probably just hour before the meeting would be most welcome. So, all right, is there any public input today?
There's an iPhone there, Katie, got their hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Katie. It's Pauline. Robert knows this is my secret sign on from selectmen's meetings. Just one comment, no criticism. Ellen was asking about public input and no response and so on and so forth. I'm a senior, 73 years in. I've not received any communication whatsoever from this committee or the senior center or anywhere else about this project. Of course, I know there is a lot about it because I follow you, but there must be some gap somewhere.
Um, well, I guess there's not really a gap because we haven't started the broad scale public input process. We're ready to start that now. We've been doing small scale things with the current users, and then we just started with Newton Street Festival. And so I think November 7th, the table at town meeting, and then the November 7th public input session would be the beginning of something where the broader public would be engaged in that way.
Well, at least that's clarifying because I see people as you do, Katie, and nobody seems to know much about what this is going to cost them, and the residential taxpayers are concerned because they're facing a number of expenses in the coming fiscal year, not the least of which is stormwater. So you don't need competing efforts, but I just feel that I tell people what I can, and I try to be very neutral. But public outreach for this project is the only way you're gonna sell it. It's all I can do. So good luck with that.
Agreed. Public input is very much a priority. Thanks, Pauline.
My good news, Katie, is I'm not gonna be here when it gets to that point, so I'm good. Anyway, good luck with that.
Well, I hope you will be. I hope you will be there on our grand ribbon cutting day.
By the time this thing is finally paid for, I'll be well over 100 years old, and I'm hoping I'm not here talking to you. You have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. You too, Pauline.
Thank you.
Everything's leveraged.
All right. So in terms of our next meeting, do we want to meet prior to November 7th? Or that would be 2 weeks. November 6th is 2 weeks exactly. Do we want to meet prior to that to go over details of the public input process?
I think it's probably a good idea. You know, we wanna all, you know, get our act together and who's gonna do what, and who's gonna say what, and what are we gonna hand out, and what are we gonna have for displays and things like that, so that it comes, this will be the first one, will be the last one, but I think it'll be a good idea.
It does give it time to print, like design and print what you want.
Well, she has a substantial, that was at the Newton Street Festival.
Okay.
I mean, the large, in terms of the visuals for November 7th, Katie, do we have enough of them, or do you need more?
I think we can probably use the ones that we have, but we certainly want to go over the presentation and,
Katie, you have no idea.
who's going to say what. And, we've got a good start to it thus far, but I'm sure with multi-speaker format, we're going to want to modify that a bit. So.
And then being on the same page is important.
Agreed. So 4th, 5th, or 6th?
Should we ask John to submit a proposal for the schematic? If it's 30% right, is that the right number, John?
Yeah, I actually sent over a draft, what they call phase 2 contract. We can just break off the schematic part of it.
You got it? Okay.
It's a little bit more than what you have for funds, but we have 10 grand, I think, still left over. That was going to be for town meeting, which I think I can integrate that into the schematic set. And I'll send over, I'll get over to Katie and
Thank you.
send around.
We could, if there's a chance, we can start looking for other grants, Robert, that we can get our hands on.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a couple of small sources, but
yeah, let's talk about that.
it's not really big money.
And then Katie has identified, or Katie and I have identified some potential grants.
Mhm.
There's one especially intriguing about trying to get the broadband down that street because
That's a good one.
that particular location is an underserved location because it doesn't exist yet.
Because there's nothing on
So-
it.
There's no complete street stuff going at this point in time.
And we just did the project on Sandy Pond and you can't apply it in for 4 years.
Okay, so
Or
that's all. Okay, that's,
implementation anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
We
we've
got a
got
lot
that though, but.
So when will we meet, Katie?
So I think the options are the 4th and the 6th. So the 5th is election day. I don't know if people want to meet on that day. We certainly can't meet in town hall that day, right? So but
Six.
The 6th is the only date I'm not available if I'm needed.
you want to make you here, get you here.
and Carolyn's not going to be available if we meet on the 6th either. So is everyone available on the 4th?
Is
So
that
the
fine?
only, the only caveat on the 4th is the select board is meeting on the 6th because at 6 because of the election.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know.
We can meet down at the
I,
senior
yeah, I
center.
agree.
Yeah, we can meet at the senior center. Robert, if we're talking mostly about the presentation for the 7th, I don't know that you'd have to be at that one. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think it would be a
What
conflict
about
for you.
Dan?
Yeah, I have to be at the select for the transfer station permit dates or.
Oh, okay.
And by usual.
No, I think that the public outreach is,
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah, I don't
do the
think I,
public
I
outreach.
don't
don't
need
think
to-
I need to be there.
Well, what about the 30th and the 31st? Is that, you know,
Halloween.
your trick or treating?
No, but I'll be sitting on my front steps for a couple hours.
You got a good crowd down there.
I mean,
I
we
think,
could do the 30th or the 4th.
Yeah.
Well, you should
I
come
think
sit
The
on-
4th and no.
Oh, you can come sit on our porch, you got, we have 100.
maybe the 4th, what time?
Does 6 p.m. work for everyone?
Okay.
Yep.
And that's gonna be at the senior center?
Yes, and thank you everyone for rolling with the location change. I'm down in Falmouth for Massachusetts Councils on Aging Conference, so the center is closed tonight. Okay, so Monday, November 4th at 6 p.m. at the Senior Center. All right. Wonderful. Do I have any last comments or a motion to adjourn?
I move that the meeting be adjourned.
Second?
All right. Let's see. Now I have to go back through. Ellen,
I.
Ken,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Bonnie,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. So I declare us adjourned at 8:02 p.m.